Hello, everyone. Welcome to Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Joe Healy here to take you through a couple things, recapping Thursday's SEC games, talking a little about those, also getting you ready for Friday's action around the conference. Before we do any of that, I have to remind you that this episode of Weekend Waypoints and every episode of Weekend Waypoints is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get ready for a new season of fishing fun with Academy Sports and Outdoors, and reel in the best gear at low prices every day. Plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store or curbside pickup on academy.com orders. All right, welcome into the show, everyone. Apologies for that that coffee-related burp at the top of the show. Ideally, I'd do that before we start recording, but hey, this is live. This is what happens. Couple interesting games Thursday night. I was going to say fun, but maybe not fun necessarily in some weird ways. Like, at least in the LSU Mississippi State game, there were, the atmosphere was fun. And during LSU's comeback, it was fun in the stadium, but kind of a weird, momentum dynamic where Mississippi State jumps out to a quick lead. LSU comes fighting back. Anyway, let's get to the nuts and bolts of it. LSU 8, Mississippi State 6 to start that series in Baton Rouge. It was all Mississippi State early, up 6-2. Cade Anderson, LSU starter, giving up 3 home runs in his start. LSU really kind of worked him through it, though. Like, the early hook didn't come, I think, acknowledging that this is going to be a long weekend. And, they needed to save some bullpens. So Cade Anderson gives up some runs, but they ride him out to 101 pitches. And ultimately, that ended up being valuable, just given that they didn't have to go to the bullpen quite as soon, and it gave the offense time to get to work. So it was a 5-run fifth inning for LSU that flipped the script there. Daniel Dickinson, a 3-run homer, Stephen Milam, a 2-run homer, and then Zach Cowan came on the back end and was absolutely excellent. 4 shutout innings for Zach Cowan. He's been really good for them, and I have to wonder if LSU ends up needing to make a change in the rotation. And I don't think they're there yet, but in the event they do, like, Zach Cowan's an interesting candidate. I mean, let's not forget that he was a very successful starter at Wofford, and last year was really, really good. And it's not as if it was a smoke and mirrors guy. Like, he's not throwing 97, but he's got good stuff with a 2-seam fastball changeup combination that's really tough. And so that's kind of interesting to monitor. A tough loss, obviously, for Mississippi State. This probably feels like one they should have. They were given the 6-2 lead, but that's baseball sometimes. But the reality is they fall to 1-6. The next 2 games this weekend feel really, really important. And speaking of which, Ole Miss 7, Florida 5. First, a quick programming note for them. They are finishing their series today, Friday, with a doubleheader. So they're going to finish that thing up real quick. But Ole Miss got the first game of this. And again, it mirrored the Mississippi State LSU game insofar as Ole Miss got out to a pretty good, comfortable lead early. Florida battled back, but just couldn't quite come all the way back. Hunter Elliott wasn't perfect for Ole Miss, but he battled, didn't walk anybody. That's obviously critical. So did a fairly nice job there. On the other end, Florida pitchers walked 13 batters. Florida used 7 pitchers. They walked 13 batters, and that's a real problem. I mean, it goes without saying. You can't be as beat up as Florida is on the mound and then have the primary issue be walks, be free 90s, right? Like, if you get hit, you get hit, but walking 13 guys is just not going to work with a pitching staff that's already short some guys. So that was not great. And then in the big picture, Florida is banged up, but at some point it just gets too late, right? Like, they're 0-7 now. If you saw my piece on the site this past week, no team that started 0-6 in SEC play in the last 10 years has made a regional. Now, that doesn't make it impossible. Still a lot of baseball to play. And Florida is theoretically going to get healthier. But, at some point you just run out of rope. And it's just getting increasingly harder. And we know this league is, yes, they've already played 2 of the best teams in the league in Tennessee and Georgia. So you'd think you might have some more manageable series coming up. Well, this was thought to be one of them. So the next 2 games, I don't want to say must win, because that feels ridiculous for March 28th. But man, like this doubleheader today, like if you're Florida, you really cannot let that thing get away, because at 0-9, you kind of are toast, like, because you're never going to navigate the final 21 games cleanly. Even a great team is not going to take a 21 game sample and get out of it clean. So Florida, just like today's doubleheader, is absolutely crucial for the Gators to get something out of it. All right, let me flip over to some comments here. Carl Dunn says, good morning. What a comeback by the Tigers. Yeah, that fifth inning was crazy. It went from that game feeling like it was in Mississippi State's control to LSU was up in like 30 seconds. I mean, it might have only been like 4 or 5 minutes of real time. It was just like all of a sudden out of nowhere, like LSU just blitzed them. And then that was all she wrote. And that's part of why I say, like, it was a weirdly paced game. Like it was kind of slow, and, there were these like bursts of action, but then there would be long stretches of like not quite so much. And it was just kind of a weird game, but LSU shows its toughness and its mettle there. And frankly, and we'll get to my next comment, which kind of alludes to it. Like, Mississippi State started Evan Sierre. They want to keep Pico Khan on regular rest. Okay, fair enough. Like that teams approach the Thursday games differently. Obviously LSU with Cade Anderson, left him in the order. But if you lose that game, now all of a sudden you're looking at, to win the series, we have to beat Pico Khan. And LSU can. It's a good offense. They've got their own good, talented pitchers. Like, it's not impossible, but man, you'd rather go through the weekend not having to have that game, right? So inside LSU baseball, Jason Armstrong, much like Doyle start first, Bama Anderson battle. Yeah, that's a good comp. I would agree with that. Liam Doyle starting against Alabama. That was a huge win. A loss last night would have put LSU's losers of 3 straight conference games and facing Pico Khan today. Yeah, exactly. Like you needed to be in a situation where you're almost like against Pico Khan, playing with a little bit of house money there. We'll see. Should be a fun matchup. All right, let's talk about the series this weekend that we haven't talked about already. We'll kind of just bullet point our way through these. Auburn at Georgia, that was my series of the week on the site. So if you haven't read that, go read that at d1baseball.com, my preview of this series. But could be a thing where in each game, 1 to 15 wins. The series is in Athens. We know that place allows for some run scoring, shall we say. So that very well could be a situation where the teams, whoever wins the series, is going to have to win ugly. The big question for me is which team gets more out of its rotation. Georgia is going with Charlie Goldstein, Brian Curley, Leighton Finley. Goldstein and Finley are experienced hands. I think Georgia's just committed to, as I think makes sense, we're just going to keep running them out there. And, with Goldstein, he's still working back health-wise, but Finley just hasn't quite been the same. But with those two guys, we're just going to kind of keep running them out there and just hope they round into form. And then Brian Curley was a matter of like, hey, he's our best arm, arguably. Let's just start him and see what we get. And last week it worked pretty well. So they're trying some things. But then Auburn's got Sam Dutton, who's been excellent, and then Cade Fisher, and then a TBA, perhaps Christian Chatterton. That's at least been the case before. But which team gets more out of the rotation? I feel like if you said, Joe, you can pick one data point I'll give you now to help you predict who wins this series, I'd want to see starting pitching lines. I think that's going to be a huge thing. And then my other thought here is, I don't know that we've really, even Mark and I, who cover this stuff closely and talk about it every week, and have really grasped the fact that like Rylan Zaborowski and Robbie Burnett are like national player of the year type guys right now. There are plenty of other candidates, obviously. I'm not saying they're going to win it or they're even the leaders necessarily. I'd have to really look at all the other conferences and figure out if there's somebody I'm missing. But, Justin LeBron's obviously in that mix. Merrick Houston for Wake Forest, maybe that mix. But, like, those guys are right there. And just such impressive scouting and recruiting to get those guys on campus, because they were nice players at Miami, Ohio, and UNC Asheville, but they weren't guys that people thought were can't miss as they moved into the SEC. So kudos to that coaching staff for identifying them as guys that could be what they are, and they're really performing. Flip over. We've got a comment waiting here. Carl says, the box was definitely rocking after that comeback. Going to be dodging rain. No decision yet. Yeah. It kind of seems like, based on the fact that in Oxford, which is, not next door to Baton Rouge, but is in the same region, based on the fact that they're playing 2 today. Like, you just know that the weather's going to be dicey. I saw a decent number of doubleheaders today just across the country. So feels like it might be a little bit of a dicey weather weekend, but we will see. Arkansas at Vanderbilt. Can Arkansas keep it rolling on offense? I mean, my goodness. Like, there were so many questions about that unit coming into the season, and I had all the same questions, and they've just answered them all in a positive way. So they've been excellent. Can they keep that rolling? I'm interested in what Gabe Gackle does. I talked about all Arkansas stuff with a podcast you can find out now, Highway to Hoover, with Matt Jones from WholeHogSports.com. Talked a lot about the pitching with him, and why Gabe Gackle hasn't quite been himself, what options they might have moving forward. So check that out if you haven't listened to it. But I will be intently watching Gackle start just to see what's what for him. Vanderbilt's going with J.D. Thompson, Cody Bowker. That has been the 1-2 all season. They're going back to Connor Fennell, though, who started last weekend. I was impressed with him. The strikeout rate is incredible, which is really impressive when you consider that it's not a guy with a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. Like, it's high 80s fastballs, but, man, his secondary stuff is so good. His off-speed pitches, he gets a lot of whiff on them. And he's fun to watch pitch because he is kind of just an old-school pitcher. So I'm excited to watch him again against a really good offense in Arkansas. Oklahoma at Bama. This series is fun because to me it feels like, and we don't know this, we won't know this for a while, but do you want to host and win this series? Because it kind of feels like Alabama and Oklahoma are in a similar spot in the SEC pecking order where, they're off to really nice starts. Neither of them are considered like the elite of the elite, along with, Tennessee or Arkansas at the top. But could they host? Absolutely. Like, they're both in that conversation. But the path obviously gets easier if you win this series. No Riley Quick in the rotation for Alabama. He was dealing with a blood blister last weekend. No word if that's as of yet if that's related or different. Doesn't mean he won't pitch this weekend. He was listed as questionable on the availability report, so he could pitch. He's just not slated to start as of right now. So I think Oklahoma's toughness will serve it well in this series. Being on the road, that's one thing that this Oklahoma team has really shown is toughness and resiliency to kind of fight through games. I think that'll serve them well. And it's an interesting offensive matchup. Oklahoma's offense, athleticism, making things happen. They've got some pop too, but it's largely based on, hey, let's get out and run. Let's hit balls in the gaps. Let's clog the bases with runners. And Bama's offense is more physical. Like, they are a little more home run dependent. Which one of those plays better this weekend? We'll find out. Tennessee at South Carolina, I will be there. I'm leaving for Columbia here in just a little bit. Honestly, like, at the risk of being flippant, my big question is, does South Carolina have anything for Tennessee? Is there anything they can do to kind of slow them down, make it uncomfortable, make it difficult? I would have said a few weeks ago, like, hey, I think there's enough talented pitching here for South Carolina to at least maybe minimize the scoring. But the last couple of weeks, the pitching hasn't been as good as it had been in non-conference. And I guess that's just a matter of, non-conference versus conference, although they didn't pitch that bad against Clemson either. But so that's what I would have thought. But that seems to have backslid a little bit. So we'll see. I'd love to be surprised and show up and have a really competitive series. But based on the way Tennessee's playing, I don't have a ton of confidence in that. And then how does Liam Doyle do? He's obviously was just a supernova to start the season. SEC play has been a different deal. We kind of knew it would, right? Like, it's just harder. But what does he do against here on the road, but against a lineup that just frankly isn't that deep? Nathan Hall's really having a nice year. Obviously, Ethan Petrie's dangerous. You've got a couple of other guys that can hurt you a little bit, but it's not among the top lineups in the conference. This feels like a good spot for Liam Doyle to fully get back on track. Back over to the comments. Morning, vis-a-vis. I see that there. Tommy Halloran asked a good question that I bet I'm not going to have a great answer for, but why can't we normalize pitch velocity being shown on the SEC Plus broadcast for every SEC stadium? Why do some have it and others do not? Massively aids the viewing experience, in my opinion. I would agree. I would always get frustrated when I would watch and not have it. I would say there's a couple things here, and since I don't work for ESPN, like, I don't have great answers. I don't have confirmed answers, I guess I should say, but there are a couple things that I would think of. One is there's a difference. I think we have to understand that a game that's on SEC Network is going to be different than SEC Plus, first off. So SEC Plus broadcasts are produced locally, have usually local talent and local production. And so it really kind of is up to each individual production setup to how they do the game. So I think sometimes it's just a matter of whoever is in charge of the score bug and the graphics and stuff just either didn't click a setting that shows the velocity or just doesn't know how, or like it could just be something like that where it's like, hey, we've got a grad student working the production today who's never done baseball and he just forgot to check a box that shows the velo on the screen. It could be that. I also know coaches are kind of picky about it. Some coaches don't like the velo being out there. Finding accurate velos for pitchers is not hard these days. You do a Twitter search for any pitcher in the SEC in particular, and you'll see pages from media and, kind of like evaluators, like amateur evaluators, guys who work for organizations like Perfect Game, or, we have David Seifert with Prep Baseball who does some of this stuff. So it's not hard to find velos, so they're not really hiding anything, but coaches can be kind of picky about it. I think the other one is just like, if they don't think it's accurate, if it's hot or if it's a little slow, maybe there's a little bit of hesitancy to use it. I'm able to run TrackMan during games, so I see the actual accurate velo, and sometimes the TV gun can be 2 to 3 miles an hour off. And so maybe if they just decide it's not giving an accurate representation, maybe that's the choice they make. So I can't confirm any of those. I agree with you that I prefer to have it versus not, but I don't know the actual answer on that, Tommy. It's a good question. Todd Harris says, big series for Kentucky and A&M. Winner can start to right the ship. Loser has a really tough hole to dig out of. Who do you think pulls themselves up by the bootstraps and comes out on top this weekend? Good to hear from you, Todd, first off. That was my next series on my list. My big question here, and I'll answer your question, Todd, but my big question here is, can Kentucky's offense exploit some of the holes in A&M's defense? A&M's not been a good defensive team. Kentucky's not quite the same as it was a couple of years ago. I think they've got more offensive firepower now than they did a couple of years ago when it was really heavy on the bunt and run stuff. But still, this is a lineup that's pretty athletic. A lineup that moves well. Clearly a lineup that handles the bat well, because you can't play at Kentucky in this era if you're not able to play the small ball game. Can they speed up A&M here? I think that's going to be key. If A&M's offense is what it's been, there are really no more words to say how not effective A&M's lineup has been. It's shocking how not effective they've been. So I kind of like Kentucky here. At this point, those might be famous last words, and this turns out to be the weekend A&M figures it out. But I've just seen so little from A&M. It just doesn't seem like anything's changing, right? There haven't been any flashes. Okay, they're 0-6, but hey, these two games, extra innings, they scratched and clawed and fought, and they came up short. It hasn't been any of that either. So I keep waiting for even if it's not a win, just some sign of the team waking up from this sleepwalk phase they've been in, and it just hasn't happened. So at this point, I'm just inclined to be look, this might just be who they are, and I don't think they're going to go 0-30, but they might just not be very good. And so I do kind of like this Kentucky team to be able to take advantage of some of that, and we'll see. I'm also fascinated to see what is the crowd like at Bluebell Park. This is a series at A&M, typically one of the better atmospheres in the SEC, but how fed up are their fans? How ambivalent are their fans at this point? Maybe it helps that, men's basketball has been eliminated, so there's a little more focus maybe, but I don't know, softball is playing well at A&M. We'll see. But I just do wonder if there is going to be kind of the atmosphere is just going to be pretty sterile, because maybe the fan base is kind of exhausted by this at this point. So we'll see. Looking forward to though. Todd, you bring up a good point that it is a big series. Eric Simmons says, what's wrong with Florida? a lot. I mean, some of it's not their fault. The injuries, you can't really control that. I think that's the biggest thing is the injuries created a situation where they got off to a really slow start. And now they're in a situation where it almost feels like, when you get your vehicle stuck in the mud or the snow, if you live in a part of the country where that's the thing. And like sometimes hitting the gas harder makes it worse because then you're just like spinning a hole into wherever you are. It kind of feels like maybe that's where Florida's at now. Even as they've gotten a little bit healthier, Cade Curlin's back, some of the pitchers who have been out are throwing again, yada, yada. So I just do think it was like they got beat up and then they dug themselves a hole, and now it feels like they're struggling to just do enough to get out of it. Relatedly, Josh says if Florida falls to 1-8 or worse 0-9, is it time to really panic? I mean, yeah, like mathematically speaking, it would be possible to get back into being a regional team, right? You go 13-17 in the league. So if you're 0-9, you got to go 13-8. And it's not easy, but it's doable. But man, like that's working really hard, right? Like, so I don't know, panic is maybe a strong word because I'm just like, I don't know what that would even look like, but yeah, like you should at 1-8 or 0-9, like there should be concern. Like that's just might be too big of a hole to dig out of. And that's true for Florida. It's true for A&M. It's true for Mississippi State if they come out of the weekend 1-8, South Carolina, like all these teams that are off to relatively slow starts. Eric Simmons says, I think Texas A&M needs to fire Michael Early if they miss the NCAA tournament. What do you think? I will leave that to Kendall. That is kind of Kendall's, the coaching carousel stuff is kind of his area of expertise. I don't have any information there, but I will say in this day and age in college baseball, with roster movement being what it is and NIL being what it is, that from my standpoint, it feels like it might just be easier to like make some changes to the roster that you need to make versus making an entire regime change. Again, that's no inside information, but man, you better really be sure you need to reset if you're going to move on a guy after 1 year. Like that's kind of my general take. Last series here, Texas at Missouri. Mike Rooney mentioned this fact to me that Augie Garrido lost 4 of his last 5 series with Texas at Mizzou. Now, obviously, different era. That's Big 12. For Texas, but interesting nonetheless, and goes to show that like coaches get kind of skittish playing there because like weird things just happen. I've talked about it a bunch, and I think sometimes people don't believe me. Weird things do happen in Columbia, Missouri, and once a year they tend to get somebody. We'll see if it's this. I do think Texas is the way they've had to win games where it hasn't necessarily been pretty or clean all the time or easy. I do think lends itself to doing well on the road in this kind of environment. There's not going to be great atmosphere. Obviously, the crowd's not going to be nearly as big as in most other SEC places, but it just hasn't been as easy for Texas. So I do think they're kind of like hyper-focused from game to game on, hey, what do we need to do to fight our way to a win today? That kind of attitude, I think, probably serves you well in a series like this where you're going to have to create your own energy. You're going to have to come in there and kind of overcome some elements, whether it's literal elements like wind or cooler temperatures, or just the element of it's hard to get up to play a series at Mizzou, like because it's just not electric in the way Mississippi State is, or so many other Ole Miss, LSU, name your SEC team. So it's just different. Hello, Expo. I see you. Good little go Vols there. Eric Simmons says, I think Jim Schlossnagle might be the SEC Coach of the Year. What do you think? That guy can coach. Agreed, he can coach. A little too early for me on SEC Coach of the Year, Eric. But he's certainly going to be a candidate if they keep playing like this. I mean, certainly. So we'll see about that. All right. That is going to do it for this edition of Weekend Waypoints, a production of SEC Extra and D1Baseball.com. Enjoy the baseball this weekend, everyone. Again, I will be in Columbia, South Carolina for the series between Tennessee and the Gamecocks. So I'll have coverage from that series. We'll have people all over the place at D1 Baseball. So I know if you're watching this, you're following all of us and keeping up to date on our work, and we appreciate you greatly. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors for sponsoring this and every edition of Weekend Waypoints. Enjoy the baseball this weekend, everybody. I will be back tomorrow morning to recap it all, and I will talk to you then.